There is no sugarcoating it. I can't recall a more turbulent, emotional, or painful time for our industry than this one. This being said, our team here at LE Miami and This Is Beyond truly believe that we are all in this together. Our goal is to bring our community together and arm you with information that will enable you to do this and see more success than ever on the side of it. We'll also be sprinkling in some more social virtual guides over the coming weeks, which we're super excited about. We can all use a little Zen and now, so we planned an upcoming session on meditative breath work led by the teacher, which you'll hope you'll into on Instagram Live next Thursday, 5 p.m. London. Now on to what we're all here for today. Today's episode. Businesses, there are few things more critical for us at the moment than communicating with our customers and stakeholders in the right way. That's why I asked two of our industry's most seasoned leaders in communication to walk us through their approaches to crisis communication and how they plan to evolve these strategies moving forward. We're privileged to have both Amar Lalvani and Bashar Wali with us today. Amar is the CEO of Standard International. He's a 20-year hotel veteran. Since 2013, has built Standard International into one of the world's most innovative, most disruptive hospitality companies, expanding new openings globally and launching a distribution platform called One Night. Bashar Wali is the president and CEO of Provenance Hotels. As many of you know, Provenance is the hospitality management company behind the most creative art-led properties in the States, from Real and Palm Springs to the Heathman in Portland. A huge thank you to you both for joining us today. We'll open the floor for a little later, so please submit your questions for Amar and Bashar using Zoom's Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get them answered. Amar, I'll turn it over to you to answer first. There's no question COVID-19 is immensely impacting business operations across industries. Your brands in particular, how has it changed how you communicate and how frequently you're communicating with your customers?
Thanks for having us and doing this. I think it's a very important topic. The crazy thing, like you mentioned, is the scale and scope of this for the hospitality business. We have, just to give you a sense of magnitude, we have between Standard and Bunkhouse 14 hotels, and this situation has impacted about 2,000 employees as team members. So if you think about how small we are relative to the industry, it gives you a sense of the magnitude. I think in the US alone, it's about 16 million people working in travel and tourism. And in the world, it's 266 million people. So the numbers are just staggering. And I would venture to say every single one of those people has been impacted in some way. So in terms of communication, we really think about it in our constituents that we have to address. First and foremost, the guests who were actually staying in the hotels at the time and ensure their safety. That's kind of our first and foremost priority in our shutdowns. And then the team members who have all been impacted in significant ways, the communities that we've served and always serve, the owners of our hotels, capital partners, and of course, our shareholders. So communication starts to break down in terms of constituents very, very quickly. And each of those constituents has nuances around them. In terms of the types of communication, we've tried to maintain true to the voice of the brand. It's a little bit difficult with a brand like ours, which is built around social, built around fun, built around engagement to do that. So we're doing a lot of new things to maintain our engagement in terms of self-care at home, whether it's horoscopes or fun things like how to make your bed or recipes from our chefs. So there's that kind of brand-oriented stuff. Then there's really the taking care of the employees who have been impacted. So we started a relief fund for both Standard and Bunkhouse through GoFundMe, which was, quite successful in terms of the engagement, sad for the purpose. So there's these new types of communication, and the relationships with our capital partners and our shareholders is very active kind of week by week as we learn from the sources we can learn from and try to set plans and expectations in an uncertain world. So we try to stay heavily engaged with all of those constituents. And the last one, which I'm quite proud of, is the engagement with the community. We started an initiative to use our sadly empty buildings to put hearts on our windows to show our support for the urgent care workers who are working throughout the night. So I think we break it down into those constituencies and are very careful and active in how we engage and communicate.
No, it's a really good point. There's a lot of people, and it's always about who you're talking to. It's nice that you've been kept to all those people in mind. Bashar, how have you been communicating with your client base during COVID-19? And what responses have you received to these communications thus far?
It's a really tricky topic, obviously, this idea of what to say and what's appropriate to say. And I've seen a lot of communication that have been tone deaf, I call them, trying to sell you something or push something your way. And I found that on the COVID topic, what could I possibly tell you that you don't already know? So all these emails that we get every day about COVID-19 updates from people who are not experts on the topic just seem to clutter our inbox. So our approach was to really take it of a moment in time to really nurture relationships that exist with a lot of our clients, starting with the corporate clients. And I'll give you a silly example I thought of actually and kind of retracted. It's sort of a secret that no one knows that hotels are full of toilet paper. We have lots of it because the manufacturers who make toilet paper for hotels don't have the distribution channels to get in the hand of consumers. So I said, you know what? People are dying for toilet paper unnecessarily, obviously, we all know. But I said, let's go take toilet paper and send it to all of our top clients and say, hey, we're thinking of you at this moment of need and we have something to share with you and let's share it. And even that, even though helpful, seemed tone deaf to me. Seemed like we were trying too hard and we're trying to be cute. So a lot of what I've done is personally picking up the phone and saying, hey, we're here for you. If there's anything we can do for you, now is the time to try us and find out that we're true friends and not just selling you something, and that we don't call you only when we need you. We call you when you need us. So I found that sort of one-on-one, whether it's with the employees, whether it's with the clients, and obviously harder for a bigger client base, but even the communication, the mass communication has just been as simple as, we're here for you, we're thinking of you, please know we're here for you, whatever you need. And then we as leaders, I think it is imperative for us to continue to preach and inspire belief that we will come back and we will come back strong. I think it's our responsibility to kind of shout that message loudly and clearly to everyone who will hear, to really create this confidence in our business. I've been talking a lot lately too about the idea of asking people, not forget communicating with clients, but starting with, the immediate circle of friends. If you know you have to travel, book the travel now, because you booking the travel will give us hoteliers confidence that the market is coming back and will hopefully influence your social circle to do the same. And ultimately, the burden is on us hoteliers to not make it complicated for you. Cancel free, no worries, no hassle. But the idea of self-fulfilling prophecies, I think our communications can be doom and gloom, the world is ending, or they can be positive, not in the selling sense, but in the we're all in this together. If we take care of one another, we will all prevail and we'll come back. And again, one-on-one, nothing is better than one-on-one. A handwritten note, a phone call, a personal email, rather than just blasting people with information about COVID that's not changing their day whatsoever.
We're such a human business. It's so nice to be able to remind people that we are all in it together. Art, how did you advise your current crisis communication strategy? And how does this strategy work when you're dealing with B2B versus B2C?
It's a good question. I think how we've come up with it hasn't differed from what we do every day, because we're very active on the communications front. We're constantly talking about how to engage with all the constituencies. So what we're saying and how we say it may change, but how we deal with it is the same, because I think what we've also realized for us, and we've preached this for a long time, which is the Standard brand is more than just the hotels. And we've seen that come to life in this situation, because we thought, well, how can we continue to communicate with our guests? And we realized we do a lot of stuff that wouldn't be considered normal in the hotel business. I think your constituents here on the phone do the same thing. But we thought about the team that's remained intact, and whether it's things like the reasons you come to our hotel. If you come to our hotel for the live music that we have, well, we can give you playlists. If you come for the food that we serve you, we can give you recipes. If you come to the Standard Spa in Miami for your treatments or your horoscope readings or your chart readings, we can still continue to do those things. So it was a fascinating exercise to say, wow, there still are so many things and facets of what we do that aren't related to the physical spaces. So from a B2C, as you call it, perspective, there was still so much robust content to be delivered to people that I hope are fans of what we do. Then there's the retail part of it, which is we've done limited edition T-shirts for Bunkhouse Relief Fund. We've done bring the spa home from Miami to your home as you take care, say, have some self-care, all of the proceeds going to our relief fund. So linking all the things that we already do to the current situation. I'm not saying it was easy, but I would say it came very, very naturally. I think on the B2B side, as I said, we're always in active communications with our hotel capital partners and owners. So that's maintained. What we tell them now is different, but those communications, I think, have always been robust. I would say the third part of it, say B2C, B2B, and then I would say B2G, the government part of it. We've never had to be so engaged with the government or advocacy around that. We've been, interestingly, I think Standard's been known for its activism, whether it was Ring Your Rep and the phone booths that we did to call the government, positions we've taken that are important to our business, such as gun safety or immigrant rights, et cetera. Now we add another one to it, which is the lack of social safety net in the US, which we've seen play out with the vulnerability of our employees. So getting more active in terms of our government advocacy to lobby, at least on a personal level, for what this business needs, and the exposure that and vulnerability that we've seen is a new facet that we've added through this crisis.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard the government topic come up before. It's really great that you guys are just kind of getting right in there, and then still being able to give customers, a feel of the standards so they remember the history throughout this is so important. Bashar, how does your current communications influence your ongoing market communication? And how are you developing these, and at what point do you see them changing?
I think in any communication, even during normal times, let alone now, I think the key point, the North Star, is honesty and transparency. And we've been really trying to take that line and kind of only say what we know, because it's such a crystal ball. So devising, forward-looking strategy as to how to communicate. I mean, we all cannot wait to stand on the rooftops and shout out that we're open. I think we have to keep sort of the concept, back to your point about humanity and the concept of kindness. Although, look, at the end of the day, our communication, no matter what we say, regardless of our social responsibility to do well, which I totally agree with Amar, and they've done great work at Standard in that vernacular. At the end of the day, we have responsibility to our investors, our partners, and our employees to bring business in the door. So the communication needs to center on the idea of bringing business to the hotel, but doing it with the kindness vernacular that we've all learned. I believe kindness is going to become a very big part of our vocabulary going forward, because we've truly learned from this crisis that we're all in it together. We've all heard it, and it's become almost like empty words, but we really are all in this together, and we need mutual kindness across, up, down, sideways, to partners, to vendors. I mean, there's so many vendors right now, I think about it, that aren't getting paid. We forget about them. So we need to communicate with them, and we have been. And again, honesty and transparency. We're being kind. We're saying, look, we're in this together. You have no income, nor do we. Let's work together. Let's come up with a plan. And if it's a small fisherman who literally lives check to check, we're saying, well, we probably have more means than that person, and we're going to destroy their business if we don't fund them. So we're funding. But in the when, I mean, I have my personal predictions on when. We're kind of starting to feel a little bit of forward momentum in the US, at least. The skies are sunny, and people are getting more sort of excited about what the future holds. I think personally, my opinion is July, August, we'll start seeing some transient travelers, leisure travelers going to drive-to market. My hope and personal prediction is that the big corporate economic engine will start moving after Labor Day in the US to September forward. But clearly, because of uncertainty as to, my definition of when it's safe to travel might be different than yours. So we have to be sensitive to personal opinions about when and how and what people would expect post it. And we're all trying to sort of unravel this new world and what does it look like. And, the other day we're talking about guest room keys that are plastic that get handled 72,000 times. How do you ensure when you hand it to someone that they feel good that it's clean? So there's a lot of things we're considering, but again, I just don't think we should, as an industry, get so buried into these details that may become a moot point when not if, but when there's a vaccine. So our strategy is evolving day by day, but I say sort of kindness and really thinking about all stakeholders, not just partners and employees and customers, but also vendors who are a big part of this conversation.
Yeah, sounds like a really great approach. And you're definitely looking at all aspects, which is Amar, set to be a big year for the Standard with new openings around the world. How have these plans changed, and what is your focus primarily as a brand? And, how the current situation changed the way you communicate about these openings compared to perhaps previous openings you've worked on?
We had 2019 was a big year for us opening. We've opened our first international hotels in London and the Maldives. We got them open, now they're closed, but we were happy with how they opened. Interestingly, 2020, we have a lot of plans. 2020 wasn't set to be a big opening year itself. So we're actually focused on renovating some of our existing hotels, in particular Miami and downtown LA, which we're still working very actively on. So I think it's okay from that perspective. I think looking out forward, we're still working on the projects. I think it would be naive to assume that things don't get delayed by pure logistics or financial markets and the lending environment, et cetera. So I think it's likely that some of the projects on the books are absolutely going to get delayed. Some may get canceled. I think there are going to be other opportunities that emerge after this. I think that it's a very difficult environment for small hotel companies and independent hotels. And I'm hopeful that we are well capitalized. We have great partners. We have a great brand. I hope to bring back all our employees, and we're going to be in a position to do that. And I'm hopeful that we can get involved and lend a helping hand and lend our brand and lend our expertise and our systems to smaller independent hotels and hotel companies. I think more, as Bashar said, and everybody uses it a lot, we're in it together. But I do think this idea of banding together and consolidation in all different ways, whether it's affiliations, whether it's partnerships, I think this community on the phone needs to actually tangibly get in it together in order to succeed. There were enough headwinds from competing with big companies, from OTAs, from Airbnb, from all of those things that made all of our lives collectively and independently very difficult. I think this just exacerbates that. And I think we need to come together as a community. And, from my perspective, being lucky enough to have shareholders and a brand that will sustain this, I think we can be helpful to the independent community to help us all get back on our feet. And we'd be interested in doing that.
Oh, that's thing to hear. And it's such a good how we'll make it come back from this. Is, we've all got a banter. So that's an amazing offer.
I want to add to what Amar said on that concept. There's so many of us on this call in this community and other communities for sort of this independent boutique lifestyle space that we never walk the talk. We talk a lot about being in this together, even pre-COVID, but it seems like this is a great opportunity for us to band together, even on our sort of what our industry needs, what our segment of the industry needs, and have a bigger voice together to be able to withstand the influence of those big companies and the amount of money they dump into lobbying or advertising. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to even one-on-one begin this sort of extending a hand and holding hands and locking the circle of our industry together to have a bigger voice for our collective benefit, for our employees, for our customers, and all involved. So I think it's a great call to action on Amar's part, and those that have the wherewithal and the backing that can offer at a minimum advice to someone who needs it. I think now is the time for us to start calling on each other and taking advantage of what we can offer each other mutually for the success of all.
Yeah, definitely. And on that, I think this is a great way to all hear together. And so we'll be later, and hopefully we can help connect and put in touch as needed. Now, can you guys both tell about your brand's communications moving forward? We're kind of touched on this a little bit, but at what plan are you starting to really these messages to be, going from react crisis comms to message? Bashar, you touched on it before. I don't know if you have more to follow up on that, and if not, perhaps I could step in.
Yeah, I'll just add to what I said earlier: honesty and transparency. And the honest answer today is we simply do not know. The PPP program in the US, the government helped to bring employees back. We've taken advantage of it for the sake of our employees. So we're about to bring all of our employees back, but that only lasts 8 weeks. And although our hope is that post the 8 weeks, we're ready to open, we just simply don't know. So what we're starting to do sort of sequentially is really go out to the corporate clients and say, how are you? We have, for example, where I'm sitting today in Portland, Oregon, we have Nike headquarters is here. And they're sort of our global economic barometer. When they begin to move, a big multinational company, you sort of then start to feel that the world is starting to move. So we're constantly talking with them in the Intels of the world again in this neck of the woods and saying, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? So we're using them as a gauge as to when to start sort of communicating are thinking about opening. But for the leisure traveler, I mean, all we can do right now is throw out special offers, but it just seems so mass marketing without any thought and not really directed. So we're sort of holding back. But again, we're trying to collect data points that matter. And again, a global economic barometer like Nike really tells a story when they say, okay, we're starting to think about bringing people back from China to do training, etc. So we're trying to get cues from other industry and not just our own belief in what might happen.
Yeah, that's smart. Amar, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I think the messaging communication will start to shift when you have a line of sight on actual opening the hotels, clearly. And what that's dictated by more than anything is going to be safety. So we're very listening to what the government's saying, watching the restrictions. I think watching from other parts of the world, I think, is becoming more important. I mean, it shows the interconnectedness of this. I think when things started here, we were lucky to learn from some of the things that happened in Hong Kong. One of our capital partners is based there. And their biggest mistake, they said, was actually not closing soon enough because they were putting people at risk and there was no people in the hotel. So we learned something from that. I think we'll learn the reverse way is when it becomes safe to open again. We're watching what's happening in Europe and seeing some signs of reopening. I think a bigger question that we're really playing around with and trying to understand is what are we opening? And what does this look like when we open? And whether you move toward opening something that feels a little bit different because of these social distancing guidelines, or whether you wait until you open the proper product that we're used to delivering. And that it's such a hazy, uncertain situation. So I think it's taking cues from the government, taking cues from other cities, countries and cities that are going through this, learning from the behavior and going step by step to figure out what it is. I think as far as timing, who the hell knows, but I do think there's something about post-Labor Day that people will wrap their head around, that it's time to get back to some semblance of life. I think businesses will have always thought that way. I think, in New York City and in Europe, it's always been that the summertime slows. I think as schools actually get back in session, I think there's a psychological aspect to something has to give by that point. And I think that you'll see that commercially, and you'll see that in people's lives as well.
Yeah. Bashar, given your unique understanding of traveler mindsets, what do you think the impact of COVID-19 has been on the contemporary traveler's mindset? And how do you think this is going to affect their decisions when they're looking at when and travel in the 6 to 12 months following lockdown?
I think this was a fantastic opportunity to push the reset button that was forced upon us, but I think a lot of us have taken advantage of it and made a positive out of it. I think we as an industry have an opportunity to inspire travelers to think differently about where they want to go, not just on vacation, but in life. I mean, people have truly now been unchained from their desk by necessity. So we're going to see a lot more digital nomads. And I think they've gotten a taste of the lockdown and the loss, and we have to figure out in our lives what means the most for us. And the idea of travel becoming even more central to what we do. I mean, it's already a big part of everyone's life, but perhaps it was for that Instagram moment. But now it's more about truly making friends and making memories with the ones you love. And you've learned who your real friends are and who you can live without and cannot live without during this time. So I think a lot of it will be sort of reactive out of the idea of having been caged for so long, that I hope that we come back roaring. And I think a lot of it is in how we communicate with guests and how we inspire them to create new experiences. And again, this is not just about having, going on vacation to pick a destination, but it's also just going to see an old friend that you haven't seen forever and creating new memories together. So I think our communications should be centered around, I hate saying the word taking advantage of what happened, but really thinking about what happened. And how I always say, I'm interested in trend. I'm interested in watching how people change their lives and how they change their behavior. And clearly hopefully we're going to see out of this reset, a change in thinking and a change in mentality about what's important in life. And as a result, how can we as an industry play a part of it, be a part of helping you creating a memory with the friend you haven't seen in 10 years whom you're going to go travel and see. So I think we have a lot of opportunity to inspire and create new fans and create even more love for travel out of those who had it already, who had it in them. Because I believe we all have that innate desire to travel built in us from birth. And I think we can only further ignite that by the way we describe the offerings and we package the offerings and we make it easy for them to travel, and curating experiences. So I think we have a lot of opportunity to do really, really good work to encourage people to do more and be inspired more.
Yeah, definitely. Finally, a question for you both. How do brands anticipate a changed traveler mindset post-lockdown and an effective communications plan for recovery? Keeping in mind this idea of the creative traveler, whether they're traveling for business or for leisure. Amar, over to you first.
I think there's going to be a sort of back to basics mentality and a desire for the basics. I think everything in the past few years got so overheated, the planet got overheated, the guest experience, the nuances, the culinary landscape, the extremes, the design landscape. It was amazing, but it was overheated. What I mean by that are the nuances, or think about the culinary world, the number of openings, the amount of differentiation, the focus on the nuances, and it was an incredible time for that moment. But I also think when you go back and look at it, we got away from the absolute base. Like what you want now is not the most intricate meal from the hottest new chef. What you want now is to go have a burger and a glass of wine with a good friend. Like, I think there's going to be a back to basics mentality for quite a while. And I think that extends to things like design and the simplicity, whether it's for sanitation, whether it's for cleaning. I think there's going to be a simplification of a lot of things by financial necessity, by sanitation, by how people think, and by the realities of the fact it's not going to feel great to spend a lot of money when a lot of people are hurting so bad. It's a little bit like coming out of 2008. So I think from a mindset perspective, from an economic perspective, from a sanitary perspective, I think we're going to get to a really healthy back to basics mentality.
Yeah, that's really great insight. Really great. Thank you. Bashar, do you have any on this one?
I could not agree more with Amar about this idea that we've gotten so stuck in this rat race. And I've for a while now, I've been crying about this idea of everybody continues to look for the next thing. And the next thing is merely outdoing the last thing that was done. And no offense to anyone from Faina on the phone, sticking a woolly mammoth dipped in gold outside your hotel provided that shock and awe factor that resonated because it gave you that Instagram moment. I think going forward, we really have to think long and hard about putting ourselves in our customers and our guests' shoes, thinking about what they're thinking, figuring out what's important to them, figuring out what motivates them, what inspires them. And to Amar's point, this idea about, people brag now that we don't have plastic. I mean, that shouldn't be part of a conversation anymore. That should be a table stake. So how do we, and I keep saying, I have zero interest in the next thing. I'm really thinking about the other thing. We've got to break away from the herd because, as many know on this call that have heard me before, I stay in too many hotels for my own health, by the way. And honestly, like I stay in 3 hotels in a row, different hotels in 3 nights, take the signs off the 3 hotels, shuffle them and put them back up on the buildings. It's all starting to look the same because I think, again, this rat race of trying to do the same and trying to do more and more and more, I think really being honest with ourselves, honest with our customers, respectful and gracious, and understanding what motivates them and what gets them up in the morning, to Amar's point. And it seems like all the signs are pointing to back to basics because we've gotten away from the basics. It's great that we have a robot delivering a towel to your room, or again, the woolly mammoth that's been cold, but we forgot that we're in the hospitality industry. And hospitality to me is about a feeling. We talk a lot about sort of service. Service is what you deliver. Hospitality is how you make people feel. And how you make people feel doesn't come from things. It comes from humans. And it comes from the way you make me feel when I walk into your building. And humans do that, not things, not robots, not art, not design, not restaurants. And I agree with Amar again that the idea of F&B, people want high quality, but they want comfort. Nobody wants to whip out their phone to Google an ingredient they don't understand to find out what it is. High quality. I think we're way past the shock and awe era, and it's time for us to really be centered and focused and concerned for each other and concerned for our environment and putting our.
Yeah, it's an excellent time set, that's for sure. And it's nice to know that we're all going to be come back and be a part of that climb. Before we get into the Q&A section, Bashar, any additional thoughts you wanted to talk about or touch on before we get into the Q&A?
On that last comment about sort of back to basics, I mean, people always sort of people like binary things. They take everything in life as black or white. It's not, because we're saying simple doesn't mean it's not sophisticated design or inspiring or aspirational design or services, etc. I just think the idea of opulence, and we've sort of in the 80s, and look, we as a society, changed sort of almost decade by decade. Like we go from the opulence to the simplicity and back to the opulence, then we move to the city, then we move to the suburb. I think it's incumbent upon us to really watch how humans' behavior is changing and adapt our offering to it and react to it. And again, we often forget in our industry, it doesn't matter what I want, it doesn't matter what Amar wants, it's about our guests and what they want. So as long as we never lose sight of who at the end of the day calls the shots, it's not us, it truly is our customer. They tell us what they want, and if we don't respond to them, we're going to lose them.
Yeah, definitely. Super point. Okay, well, I'm going to dive in with the Q&As. So we have an anonymous attendee question. They're working on new content and keeping our guests and fan base engaged. What will be the next step after this quote unquote dreaming phase? And when will it be okay to pivot back to a selling strategy?
I think it's okay to pivot back to a selling strategy when there's a line of sight on opening. I just think that that's when it becomes real. That's when it becomes necessary. And that line of sight on opening will also align with people's needs to travel, whether it's for business or for pleasure. So I think once you have a line of sight on the openings, then I think people will understand and be sympathetic to the fact that if you're opening, you need to fill the hotel, but you're also opening for a reason, because people have a need to travel again. So I think it'll start to become quite clear when that line of sight comes into view.
Yeah, definitely. So another question here. Do you think with this moment of reset, our industry can evolve together within a more sustainable tourism and more responsible time with the planet?
I think, again, like I said, this reminds me of, when hotels used to brag that they had Wi-Fi or they had flat screen TVs, right? I mean, if you have to tell me that you're socially responsible and care about the planet, you failed miserably. It should be part of your ethos every day. And look, it's not that easy, and it requires sometimes investment. So over time, it'll come. But I think people are definitely more conscious, and particularly given the lockdown and what we saw the lockdown do to the planet, that it really gave it sort of a pause to take a breath of fresh air finally. I think it's going to be more centered in people's focus and attention, and they're going to expect it and demand it. So it almost, again, like the farm to table concept. If you have to brag about your farm to table, well, your 5 minutes ago, that's become a standard. So the idea of bragging about it, I think, becomes more gauche than having people expect it. But I think people will seek it out, and it'll be part of the lexicon. And back to the kindness concept that I talked about. I mean, kindness includes the planet, right? Like, we have to be kind to our planet and kind to our children and grandchildren to whom we're leaving this mess behind. So I think you'll definitely see a movement. Obviously, the idea of people's financial situation may dictate that, because generally speaking, those eco trips were higher end. So I think bringing the eco trip down to the urban hotel that may be 3-star becomes as important as having a luxurious trip to some place in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
I do wish people would link it closer to the environment and what's going on and notice it. I'm not that optimistic. What I am somewhat optimistic about is the shakeup that this has caused in an appreciation for the people that are working the front line in this industry, the people that are in the hotels, that are in the restaurants. I'm hopeful that there's more of an appreciation for those people who have been most impacted by this. So I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful that business-wise, people will start to realize and see hotels as communities and businesses themselves. These are not, but one thing that's happened, I think, very negatively for the industry is that people have seen hotels as pure real estate. And they're talked about as if they were an office building, and they're priced from a value perspective as if they were an office building. They're not. And they're traded like they were a commodity, which they're not. And I think the reality is, when you see a hotel shut down, the Standard Highline has 600 employees, 750 employees at the peak of it. That's not, that's a human organism. That's a lot of people. So I think people hopefully for our industry, we'll start to see the humanity of hotels and what they deliver and stop thinking about them as assets.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's so much human business in our business. Nice to be able to highlight. I have a question I think could be good for both of you. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but how have you tailored your communication strategies to different regions? As COVID continues to impact various jobs at different rates, how are you guys going about, strategically messaging to those different areas?
We're all U.S. based, and generally speaking, although New Orleans has taken the crisis differently, perhaps than Seattle, for sure. Seattle took a very extreme measure immediately, while New Orleans was a little more lackadaisiac in their timing of response, just because that city is just lives and thrives on that sort of fun-loving attitude. So our messaging has been consistent across, just because it's sort of more U.S. focused, not international.
Okay.
For us, it's now that pretty much everything's shut, it's largely consistent because everything's shut. I think the differences are going to be around timing, and the difference is going to be around resorts, which are pure leisure, versus urban hotels that have a big corporate business. So I think the Maldives is going to be very different than New York in terms of the messaging, because you get into the psyche of why people are traveling. So I don't think we quite have it figured out, but I think right now it's quite consistent because we're closed. I think as I talk about that line of sight on opening, the why is very important as to why people are traveling. I think that'll dictate it. I think the biggest thing you'll see is differences in timing across regions and cities, and then differences in types of property, especially between the resort and the urban properties.
That makes great sense. And Amar, while I have you, how do you see the SOP of the actual guest experience possibly changing? For example, self check-in kiosks, where you wouldn't normally have that, maybe 6 foot separate baggage storage. I know about how you're going to open, what that's going to look like, and our attendees are also wondering for that.
Yeah, I think there's there's some short to medium term things, which are like when you immediately open, what does that look like? I think when you talk about post a solution to this in terms of a vaccine, I think we're going to get back to a reasonably normal situation. Having said that, there are some longer term things we're thinking about, which are things arguably should have happened a long time ago. The keyless entry, less touch points on actual physical contact, I think are important. I don't think one of the things that people have talked about is this spaces and distances between tables and reservations and F&B. I don't think that's ultimately viable. I don't think that's going to work. The restaurants and F&B business has run on small margins to begin with. Once you start messing around with those things, I just don't think it's viable. I don't think it works. So I think those things, bars, etc., that experience has to come back. It probably has to wait to come back properly rather than doing some compromised version of it. I can't imagine Abend in a nightclub opening in a socially distanced model, like having some compromise. It's not going to work. So you might as well wait till it's properly to open safely and correctly. I think when you think about, there will be an increased focus on cleanliness and sanitation. Sanitizer is probably going to become permanent, within the hotels and the guest rooms. I think that not having complicated design and fabrics and things that are just simpler and easy to clean, I think is going to become a new post-COVID design feature. So I think there are going to be some things that exist longer term. The shorter term stuff, of course, we'll have masks available for our guests and for employees. We'll have gloves available for our guests. We'll have sanitation. Those things I think will come very quickly when we reopen. I think a lot about that in the near term. And the longer term, what are the things we need to think about that will be sustained? But I think this overly socially distant hotel model forever would be absolutely crushing, and I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessary once we have a vaccine.
Yeah. Bashar, I have a question for you. Has it crossed your mind, even for a moment, to stay away from the hotel industry? What are you personally going to do to bring a greater sense of purpose to life?
I think the industry runs through my veins. I wouldn't know how to do it. I'm not smart enough to do anything else. I think there's a different way to do business than we have always done as an industry. And I think this idea, again, with the keeping up with the Joneses and, following the next thing and the next thing, I think Amar touched on it a little, is a hotel And I use this term a lot. A hotel is not a building. It's not just a building. The building is the vessel in which you deliver that humanity that you deliver every day, and the interconnectedness of the organism. And again, it's the employees, it's their extended families, it's the vendors, it's the partners, it's the investors. It's such a complicated, complex thing of humanity that doesn't really exist in any other businesses. So I think fundamentally, regardless of COVID, I think we were going down the wrong path as an industry, and it was inevitably going to catch up with us. And I think COVID has forced us to rethink how we do business. So I think fundamentally the way we do business and our social responsibility beyond just making money. And I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and the idea of discovering your why. People say, well, why do you do what you do? And generally the answer is, well, I want to make money. And I say, making money is a byproduct of doing good work. So you have to understand, why do you wake up in the morning? What gets you up in the morning? And some people say, like Apple says, we want to change the world. And that's a big, big thing to own. For a hotel, what are we really doing at the end of the day? Sure, we're providing a commodity, a bed and a shower. But my hope is that whoever walks in our doors leaves inspired to maybe do something different. So the idea of why do we do what we do, I think needs to become more central to everything we do for every industry, not just our industry. But I'm definitely personally thinking a lot about, why do we do what we do? What is our purpose in life? And again, sure, making money is definitely important, because for us, for the investors, for the employees, it matters. But ultimately, doing good work generates money.
Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, this has been incredibly inspiring. You've both shared such wonderful insights and your wisdom and candor. So thank you guys. We appreciate having you here today and your time. And thank you also to everyone else who joined us today, and for all of your intelligent questions, your contributions. I truly hope you guys have found today's session useful, insightful. I know I have. It's been really wonderful being on this call with you guys. You'll be receiving an invite. Like I said earlier, we're here for you. Our sole purpose is to help you and our this together. And we want to make the content as useful, actionable as possible for you. So please get for anyone on the LA Miami team if you have any questions or feedback. That's all from us so I hope everyone has a great day, great evening. We're sending you all positive vibes, and we'll see you all again very soon. Thanks, everybody.